Welcome back to Think and Speak podcast, the place where English stops feeling heavy and starts feeling natural. If you have ever known the right words but felt stuck when trying to speak, today's episode is especially for you.
That feeling is more common than people admit. Many learners believe their problem is vocabulary or grammar, but often the real challenge is mental, not linguistic.
Exactly. In this episode, we are talking about the mental shift that makes English speaking easier. Not tricks, not shortcuts. A mindset change that transforms how you speak.
And we will explain it with real examples, modern expressions, and practical grammar insights you can use immediately.
Before we begin, pause for 1 second. If improving your English matters to you like this video, leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Your support helps this conversation reach learners who need it.
Speaking English is not about sounding perfect. It is about sounding human.
Stay with us, think differently, and speak with confidence. Let's begin. Many English learners say they understand grammar rules and know thousands of words, yet they freeze when they have to speak. From your experience, Daniel, why does this mental block happen? And how is it connected to the way learners think about correct English? I would also like you to explain how fear of mistakes affects fluency and why this problem appears more in speaking than in writing. Finally, can you explain how modern English communication, especially in casual conversations, is different from the strict textbook English most learners study?
This mental block happens because learners confuse accuracy with communication. In grammar terms, they focus too much on form and not enough on function. When speaking, the brain must do several things at once: choose vocabulary, apply grammar rules, pronounce sounds, and respond in real time. If the learner is constantly checking for correctness, the working memory becomes overloaded. Fear of mistakes plays a huge role. Psychologically, many learners associate mistakes with failure. Linguistically, this creates hesitation, fillers like or and long pauses. In writing, you can edit. In speaking, you cannot. That is why speaking feels more stressful. Modern English communication values clarity and connection more than grammatical perfection. Native speakers regularly use incomplete sentences, contractions, and simplified structures. For example, instead of saying, "I do not understand what you are trying to explain," people often say, "I'm not following you," or simply, "Wait, what?" From a grammar perspective, spoken English relies heavily on the present continuous for temporary actions, discourse markers like you know, actually, and kind of, and flexible word order. These features are rarely emphasized in textbooks. The mental shift is moving from "I must be correct" to "I must be understood." When learners accept that communication is the goal, fluency improves naturally. Mistakes become part of the process, not an obstacle. Speaking English becomes easier because the brain stops treating every sentence like an exam answer and starts treating it like a conversation.
You often say that learners should stop translating in their heads. Can you explain why mental translation slows down speaking and how learners can start thinking directly in English? Also, how does this mental habit affect sentence structure and word choice in modern spoken English?
Mental translation creates delay because it adds an extra step. The learner thinks in their native language, translates into English, checks grammar, and then speaks. This process is slow and unnatural. Fluent speakers think in chunks, not individual words. In grammar, these chunks are called lexical phrases or collocations. For example, instead of translating, "I am very tired," learners should store and use phrases like, "I'm exhausted," or "I'm wiped out." These are ready-made units. Translation also causes unnatural sentence structure. Many languages place adjectives, verbs, or time expressions differently. When learners translate directly, they produce sentences that are grammatically possible but stylistically awkward. Thinking in English starts with exposure and repetition. Learners should notice how English speakers actually talk. For example, modern spoken English prefers going to over will for plans, and uses phrasal verbs like figure out, run into, or cut back. A practical exercise is internal narration. Describe what you are doing in simple English: "I'm making coffee," "I'm checking my phone." This uses the present continuous and builds automaticity. When learners stop translating and start using English patterns directly, speaking becomes faster and more natural. The mental shift is accepting that English does not need to mirror your first language. It has its own rhythm, logic, and flow.
Many learners feel their English sounds robotic or unnatural. Why does this happen? And how can changing mindset improve natural rhythm, intonation, and sentence flow in speaking?
Robotic English usually comes from overusing complete, formal sentences. Textbook grammar emphasizes full structures, but real speech relies on ellipsis, stress patterns, and intonation. For example, instead of saying, "Yes, I agree with your opinion," native speakers say, "Yeah, totally," or "I agree." These shorter responses are natural because context fills in the meaning. Mindset matters because rhythm is emotional. When learners are tense, their speech becomes flat. When relaxed, intonation improves. Grammar terms like sentence stress and connected speech explain this. Words like going to become gonna and want to becomes wanna. To sound natural, learners must allow imperfection. Using discourse markers such as well, actually, or so make speech sound human. These words have little grammatical meaning but strong conversational value. The shift is from performing English to participating in English. When learners stop trying to sound impressive and focus on sounding clear and responsive, rhythm and flow improve naturally.
Daniel, earlier you touched on the idea that learners should focus on meaning instead of grammar rules, but I feel this is one of the most misunderstood concepts in English learning. Many learners believe grammar is English. They feel that if they stop consciously thinking about rules, tenses, and sentence structure, their English will become messy or incorrect. At the same time, these same learners often say they feel slow, blocked, or anxious when speaking. So I want to explore this deeply. How exactly does focusing on meaning instead of grammar change the way learners build sentences while speaking? Also, how does this mental shift affect speed, confidence, and clarity in real conversations? From a modern English perspective, especially in informal and semi-formal situations, how much grammar awareness is actually happening in the mind of a fluent speaker? And finally, how can learners trust this process without feeling like they are abandoning correct English?
This question goes straight to the heart of fluency. The problem is not grammar itself, the problem is timing. Grammar should be learned consciously but used subconsciously. When learners try to apply rules while speaking, they overload their cognitive system. In real-time conversation, the brain prioritizes meaning. Native speakers do not think in grammatical labels like present perfect or third conditional. They think in intentions, explaining, reacting, agreeing, disagreeing, clarifying. Grammar follows automatically. When learners shift focus to meaning, sentence construction becomes more functional. They rely on high-frequency grammar patterns such as present simple for facts and habits, past simple for finished actions, present continuous for what is happening now. These tenses form the backbone of spoken English. Modern conversation does not require constant complex grammar. It requires responsiveness. For example, instead of thinking, "Which tense should I use?" a meaning-focused speaker thinks, "Is this about now or before?" That decision is intuitive, not analytical. This shift also improves speed. When grammar monitoring stops, speech becomes faster and smoother. Mistakes may still appear, but communication succeeds. And here is the key point. Successful communication builds confidence, and confidence improves accuracy over time. Learners must understand that fluent speakers are not grammatically perfect. They self-correct, restart sentences, and simplify constantly. This is normal spoken English. Trusting meaning over rules does not destroy grammar. It allows grammar to emerge naturally.
Daniel, I want to talk about confidence because many learners say their English sounds much better in their head than out loud. They know what they want to say, but something changes the moment they open their mouth. How does confidence, or lack of it, directly affect English speaking ability? And more importantly, how does a learner's identity influence the way they speak? Many people say, "I'm not an English speaker yet," even after years of study. How does that belief slow progress? From the perspective of the mental shift we are discussing today, what changes when learners start seeing themselves as English speakers instead of English learners?
Confidence is not a personality trait, it is a psychological state. When learners feel judged, by others or by themselves, their brain enters a defensive mode. Linguistically, this reduces access to vocabulary and grammar. Identity plays a huge role. If someone thinks, "I am not good at English," their brain looks for evidence to confirm that belief. Every mistake feels like proof. This creates hesitation and silence. The mental shift happens when learners change their internal narrative. Instead of saying, "I'm learning English," they say, "I speak English, and I'm improving." That small change reduces pressure. Modern English allows space for accents, imperfections, and variation. Confidence grows when learners realize they do not need to sound native. They need to sound understandable. Grammar structures like expressing opinions, "I think," "I believe," "in my experience," help learners speak from identity. Language becomes personal, not performative. When learners claim the identity of a speaker, their English becomes more direct, more expressive, and more confident. Speaking improves not because grammar improves first, but because fear decreases.
Listening is often called a passive skill, but many learners say that listening helps them speak better, even when they do not actively study grammar. Why does listening play such a powerful role in this mental shift? How does regular exposure to real spoken English change the way learners think, respond, and structure sentences? And what kind of listening should learners focus on if their goal is easier speaking, not just understanding?
Listening is not passive at all. It trains the brain to recognize patterns. Through listening, learners absorb grammar intuitively, without analysis. This includes sentence rhythm, stress, intonation, and common structures. For example, learners notice that native speakers repeat ideas, simplify sentences, and use fillers like "you know" or "I mean." Listening also reduces fear. When learners hear imperfect speech from native speakers, they realize fluency is flexible. That realization supports the mental shift. To support speaking, learners should listen to conversations, podcasts, and interviews, not scripted lessons. The goal is not to understand every word, but to understand how ideas are built. Listening builds instinct, and instinct is what makes speaking easier.
Daniel, to close this lesson, I want to focus on action. Many learners understand the theory behind the mental shift, but they struggle to apply it consistently. If someone watching this video wants to start making English speaking easier starting today, what daily habits should they change? How should they approach speaking practice differently? And finally, how can learners recognize progress when fluency feels emotional rather than measurable?
The mental shift begins with permission. Permission to speak imperfectly. Permission to be slow. Permission to grow. Daily habits should be small but intentional. Speak every day, even briefly. Focus on clarity, not elegance. Use simple grammar accurately. Replace grammar-heavy study with phrase-based practice. Learn expressions like "the point is," "what I mean is," "to be honest." These reduce hesitation. Progress should be measured internally. Less fear. Faster recovery after mistakes. More willingness to speak. These are real signs of improvement. Fluency is not about sounding advanced. It is about feeling free. And that freedom begins in the mind.